How can you predict who is going to be the one who really struggles versus who doesn't? Well, there's your clue. Low vitamin D level. Strong correlation between those that end up in the ICU and what their vitamin D levels are. Many physicians will tell you, your vitamin D is 30, it's a little bit low, you need to get up to around 50. Okay, we're finding that your vitamin D level really needs to be between 80 to 100. If you are 80 to 100, your odds of really having a hard COVID are virtually nil to none. So get those levels up. Typically takes an average of 1 million units of vitamin D to raise the blood level about 20 units. That would be an average. It's individual based upon age, history, all of that. But you can figure about 1 million units of vitamin D will raise the blood level about 20 units. Given the average person has a vitamin D level of around 30, how many million units do you need to take to get that 80 level? Most people are looking at about 2.5 to 3 million units of vitamin D that they're down. So when people are doing the whole vitamin D can be dangerous, I don't think so. I have actually seen miracle cases of people doing 1 million, 2 million, 3 million units of vitamin D in under a week and having their COVID completely reverse. They did not have access to ivermectin. The only thing they had access to was hydrogen peroxide and vitamin D. This is in India. And I learned this from an Indian pharmacist who has treated thousands over there. And they have educated thousands of physicians over there using this approach. And it was very successful. Vitamin C is another predictor of those that will be having trouble. So definitely getting your vitamin C levels up. Most of you probably don't realize this. The human body does not have the ability to make its own vitamin C. We're a bit of an oddity in that aspect in the animal kingdom. All of the rest of them can make their own vitamin C. We can't. We have got to consume it. And this, of course, goes back to the cases of scurvy that we all learned about from our history classes back in the day, and why it was important. And guess where they got their vitamin C from? Fermented foods. Awesome source of vitamin C. So there's another reason for doing that fermented food thing again. B1, thiamine, very good for helping with shortness of breath. Interestingly enough, all three of these are in the protocol. Next slide, please. So what we're looking at here is prevention. These are the simple steps that you can take just to protect your health. Half a glass of water every 30 minutes during the day. Got to stay hydrated. You cannot get electrical conductivity between the cells without water. Most of us don't drink nearly enough, and particularly in a place like Colorado Springs. We can get pretty dehydrated here pretty quickly. And the majority of the population is chronically dehydrated. So, as I see people picking up their water bottles. Eat a clean diet. That means really watching the source of your oils and your fats, which is, ghee, butter, coconut oil. Never, never, never do margarine. Do not do what we call the PUFAs, the polyunsaturated fats, which is like the canola oil, the vegetable oil. Really want to stay away from those oils. We really want to go to meat, vegetables, and then make sure that you fast. Fasting, intermittent fasting, is the most wonderful thing for your body. And if you can fast for at least 8 to 9 hours every day, that is absolutely fantastic. Once you get a little bit more accomplished and more accustomed to it, and it does depend upon health condition. There are some people who should not be fasting. you will find that you'll find yourself doing a 24-hour fast and thinking nothing of it. And you'll find that your body will thank you for it. You'll find that you start dropping weight if you're looking to drop a few pounds. You'll have more energy. Your brain will be much clearer. Really does amazing things there. The other thing it does is it really helps control blood sugar. I have one individual whose fasting blood sugars were coming in around 180. They started practicing more of a ketogenic lifestyle. They did use a product from NutriMedics called Glucomedics, which is phenomenal for helping to lower blood sugar and blood pressure and cholesterol. And other than that, they started practicing intermittent fasting. And within a month, their fasting blood sugars were sitting right around 105. That is a phenomenal improvement. What's really amazing was the puffiness left their face. Weight just started melting off, and they had a lot more energy and brain clarity. And it took virtually nothing for them to do that. It's all stuff that we could be doing, right? Those are easy things. Take vitamins and minerals daily. I would love to be able to say do it all from your food source, but we're dealing with only 2% of the mineral content in our food that we had 50 years ago. We have massively depleted the nutrients in our food supply as a result of our agrarian practices. So at this point, most of us really do need to supplement because we have a hard time sourcing food at a high enough quality level. Now with that, that doesn't mean go out and get your standard big box store nutraceuticals. A lot of those actually are pretty darn toxic. They have a lot of fillers in them, and they do not have the density of nutrient source in them that you would think they have based upon the label. And we do see a difference. One way to test it is have someone take that version of the nutrient, run a blood test, you'll find that they're still deficient. Switch them over to a high quality nutrient, go 8 weeks down the line, repeat the test. Now they're at sufficient levels. Ooh, what happened? What changed? Quality does matter. So with that, D3 daily, most people need 5,000 to 10,000 units a day. If they haven't been taking vitamin D regularly, we say go ahead and take 100 to 120,000 loading dose to start with. K2 is critical to take D3 and help the body utilize it appropriately. We can do high doses of D3 for a short period of time, and we will sometimes intentionally do that in order to help a COVID patient. But as soon as the illness fades off, that's when we want to start bringing those K2 levels back up on board, and we want to stop taking D3 for a while. What happens if you get your D3 levels really, really high? You're at risk for kidney stones. And if anyone's ever had a kidney stone, I've been told they're very, very painful and that labor is much nicer, so you don't want to deal with that. And then the other thing to be aware of is just the fact that it can also cause some other issues with nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, fatigue, brain fog. So you just don't want to get your D3 levels up too high. There's blood tests that you can do via finger stick. You can do them at home now. They're accurate. You just send off the card and you get the card back, and it'll tell you what your levels are. Those typically cost $50. Or you can certainly always go to your LabCorp. You can do any lab now, do your lab yourself through that type of organization setup. So there's all different ways to check your D levels, and I do encourage people to check their D levels once to twice a year, preferably twice a year. Bromelain, and also, and it's not on here, nattokinase. What is bromelain and what is nattokinase? And you'll see it on a further slide in the deck. Those are proteolytic enzymes. Proteolytic enzymes. Proteolytic enzymes serve a very special purpose in the body. Those two in particular are excellent at removing fibrin and destroying fibrinolytic clots. You'll see why here in a couple of minutes, why that is so important. Clotting is one of the biggest issues that we deal with COVID. Everyone, a lot of people think that COVID's a respiratory disease. It's not. It is a blood disease. It is a disease of the blood, and it's microvascular clotting in the blood. Using proteolytic enzymes really, really helps us avoid that microvascular clotting. So taking the proteolytic enzymes 30 minutes before you eat can make a huge difference, twice a day typically. And again, all these slides will be loaded on the website, so you'll be able to access them. Other than that, vitamin C, super critical. Zinc, also critical. Quercetin, super helpful to get zinc into the cell, works really well unless you are in a moderate case of COVID, at which point you really do need hydroxychloroquine as a zinc ionophore to help push zinc into the cell. We just can't get the levels high enough once people are sick. It's kind of like trying to shut the barn door after the horse got out. And then magnesium malate or magnesium citrate. Having a nebulizer, this is something that I recommend that everyone have in their home at this point, is have a nebulizer. It's phenomenal for nebulizing hydrogen peroxide. It's also really good for nebulizing other things. And oh, by the way, there are other things that we can nebulize to get rid of COVID. And I've been working with the physicians on this recently due to what we're finding is happening with ivermectin in this country. For anyone here who thinks that ivermectin doesn't work, I can give you an entire dissertation on that one later. Suffice to say, it works. India is proof of it. India's COVID rate now is through the floor. They virtually have no COVID now. They have been giving ivermectin out across the entire country. Took them a little while to get on board, but now they're on board, and they're doing much better than we are. What's really interesting is the less developed countries at this point are doing much better than the developed countries. Isn't that interesting? Makes you wonder. Maybe this is intentional. Get some ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine for having on hand in case you do have illness start up. Okay, the other thing is, and I know this is going to sound strange, but I've done it a couple of times myself. I've been in large crowds, or I've been at an event or something else, and I've been around people who have recently chosen to get vaccinated, and then I've gone home, and the next morning I've had like a sore throat. And I'm like, where is that coming from? I'm like, this is kind of weird. And then the brain fog hits, and I don't feel so good, and things like that. And I actually just went ahead and did a single dose of ivermectin. It was gone like that. Nebulizing hydrogen peroxide also works really well. So ivermectin works really well, as does hydrogen peroxide, as does, going ahead and hitting your high dose C, going ahead and taking, a 50,000 unit of vitamin D. All of those things really help just boost your immune system to knock it right on out. If you are high risk, metabolic disorder, lung disease, high blood pressure, thyroid issues, you do want to make sure that you consider something like hydroxychloroquine as a prophylactic dosage as we continue to walk through this time, particularly with what's happening with the Delta variant. Next slide. This right here is what we do if you actually get ill. What we do is we increase and add B1, and then we also go ahead and start those histamine blockers that I told you about, the Claritin and the Pepcid. Other than that, certainly this is the time that if you have ivermectin, you would start your ivermectin. All of that information is on a fabulous website from the FLCCC Alliance. That's the FLCCC Alliance. And they have protocols there. The protocol that we and our group have practiced is similar We actually tend to be more nutraceutical oriented, more supportive oriented. They tend to want to use more pharmaceuticals. Our protocol is specifically designed that you can get through COVID without having to have a physician's prescription. That is intentional because of what has happened, particularly here in the state of Colorado, with the fact that I've had physicians, multiple physicians tell me that they have been told to not prescribe ivermectin. It's kind of a tough one, but we are in Colorado. Next slide. Early, mid-intervention stage, nebulized hydrogen peroxide really, really works. This goes back to everyone should have a nebulizer in their home. That nebulizer, you should also have food-grade hydrogen peroxide, 3%. You can take that 3% food-grade hydrogen peroxide, make sure that there's no stabilizers in the hydrogen peroxide you're using, and you can dilute that to a 1-to-4 ratio. You can do that with distilled water, or you can do it with normal saline. The preference from a lot of the physicians is to go ahead and do that in normal saline, but we found that distilled water works just as well. Also, you can always make your own purified water by boiling it. Next slide. Mid-intervention, if you start finding the heart rate is over 100 and stays over 100, and you start finding that those O2 sats are dropping down below 90, this is when we want to bump up our game. And what we do is we start high dosing vitamin D. This would also be the time that you would want to increase your ivermectin dosage to 0.4 to 0.6 milligrams per kilogram per day. What does that mean? Instead of doing your ivermectin dosage once a day, as you saw on that previous chart, you would do it twice a day or 3 times a day. We can increase the dosage, okay? The other thing you're going to want to do is we can actually do that vitamin D once every 4 hours, 100,000 units, up to a total of 1 million units, unless you're working with a healthcare practitioner who knows what they're doing, and they may actually take you beyond that level. But this is the stage where you really want to be getting to be best friends with that person who knows what they're doing. I've treated some of you in here, and hopefully you've found that you've always been able to get a hold of me when you need to. What we've done is we've texted back and forth, and then when needed, we actually get on the phone with each other. And that can be any time, day or night. Okay, and I really, really do mean that. I have been on the phone at 1:30 in the morning with people in this room, and it's okay, call me. I really do mean that, call me. Okay, next slide. Stage 3. This is if you blow past everything, and typically the only time I find people have ended up in this stage is when they haven't had any intervention. Okay, this is the person who's been sick for a week, 10 days, 14 days, and done nothing. And by the way, I did have a 40-year-old who was really close to being one of these cases. When she found me, her O2 sats were already dropping down into the 70s. I told her, you need to go to the hospital. She said, I don't want to. Her roommate said, she doesn't want to. And I said, I understand. My professional opinion is she needs to go to the hospital. I'm not sure I can help her at this point. The mother and the roommates got on the phone. We all prayed together. After they prayed, I said, what's your decision? She says, I'm not going to the hospital. The roommates and the mom said, she's not going to the hospital. We're not taking her to the hospital. God's going to provide. We're going to do this. At which point I looked at them and I said, you understand my professional opinion is she needs to go to the hospital. They said, yeah. Okay. They said, now that we've got that established, will you help us? Why not? She pulled through within 3 days of us working it hard. And we did, we worked it hard, round the clock. And at one point, everyone was absolutely exhausted, and it was late, and I was concerned about being able to watch her O2 sats throughout the night. And so we loaded her all up, and we'd been loading her all up. She's loaded with ivermectin, she's loaded with vitamin D, we've been nebulizing hydrogen peroxide, we've done everything else that's on there. And so at 10 o'clock at night, they took her to the ER. And I'm thinking, good, everyone get a good night's sleep. ER only kept her for 3 hours, kicked her right back out, but guess what they kicked her out with? Oxygen. Don't hesitate to go to the ER. They're kicking everyone out with oxygen. And I've seen that in multiple cases now. So here's the key. Go when you're still well enough that they're going to kick you out with oxygen. Don't wait till past that point. Load yourself up with ivermectin, vitamin D, and everything else before you go. So if you do end up spending a few hours there, it's not a big deal. And it's still working for you the whole time. And then a lot of times what they're doing is they're sending people home on oxygen, and it works beautifully. And I've seen that happen to multiple people now. And I'm not sure, but someone told me, or at least the individual that, a couple of the individuals I've sent, they haven't been charged for it. So that has been an absolute blessing. If someone does get admitted, this is the protocol you want them to use. You will have to fight. And I mean fight hard, like threaten lawsuits, like threaten malpractice. And at this point, there's so much data behind this that it is really hard to justify not using the Math Plus protocol. It has been highly successful, and I have seen it be, people be able to argue for it. Also, I've been told that one of the best hospitals to go to around here is to actually head up to the hospital that's in Parker, not the ones right here. Go north, head to Parker. They actually have, I've even had reports of the fact that they're using vitamin D up there, which is amazing. So someone up there has got their head screwed on straight, which is good. Next slide. Long hauler syndrome. This is where we see people with brain fog, peripheral neuropathy, fatigue, loss of taste, smell. Just some of the situations that we see. Next slide, please. And so when it comes to how to treat long haulers, it really depends upon the symptoms we see. But majority of what we want to do is we want to be supporting mitochondria. We want to get their energy levels back up. One of the best ways to do that is something called QHPQQ. Using CoQ10. For every year you're over the age of 50 is your likelihood of being deficient, is the likelihood of the percentage of deficiency you have in CoQ10. So if you're like 60 years old, you're most likely 60% deficient in CoQ10, which is ubiquinol. And that's really critical towards heart health as well as energy for the body. When I came through my little COVID case, it was a 2-day down hard, back out. I literally slammed an entire bottle of PQQ, CoQ10. The company I used was Yarrow. I went through an entire bottle in under a week. And boy, did it help. Repair the membranes, brain and gut. You want to make sure you're really doing the hydration. Spend time in the sun. You need that fourth phase water structuring that comes from the sun. Most people are like, I can't exercise. I shouldn't be exercising. I'm going to tell you right now, we've actually seen that high intensity interval training, so like walking really fast and then resting, and then walking fast and resting, really does make a huge difference. So don't be afraid to exercise. Just do it to what your body feels good with. Ketogenic diet. Treat underlying infections. Every time I've found someone has really struggled with COVID or had long haulers, most of the time it's Epstein-Barr virus. A lot of people had mononucleosis in college or high school, and a lot of times that will flare. And so if you do all the support to treat the Epstein-Barr virus, you'll find that it'll actually knock it all out. And then preventing metabolic syndrome, doing all those things that lower blood pressure, blood sugar, those types of things really helpful. Next slide. So that's pretty much treatment for COVID, the biggest thing that I've seen that's been different with the Delta variant has been the level of intensity.